Thank you, Judy.
Second.
Thank you, David.
Aaron, would you care to, and Dr. Seaman is on the way.
Okay. Aaron, do you have some reports for us this morning?
Yes, sir. I can certainly give some reports on, at least on Meg's and on the Causeway Wetlands. Meg Street is out to bid this week. We're accepting bids the first week or second week of February. So hopefully we'll be able to get started on that Meg Street reconstruction project. And again, that goes all the way from First to Water. And it's going to install that next phase of the pathway all the way down to Sycamore Street. So that project, hopefully in March, I can give you an update on some other things, maybe even timing of when the contractor might be mobilizing. But right now we're just going through the bidding process. If there are any questions anybody has on that?
No.
Well, I don't know if this is legitimately synced to that, but with the reconstruction of the court facilities and stuff down there, does that interplay at all with how that is laid out? I mean, is there any schematic or anything for the newly visioned renovations in that building and that park down there? I mean, at one time it talked about moving that street out farther or having an outer loop and stuff. None of that's involved, right? Or
No, we're not doing anything along those lines because of the court. We are going to be adding more on-street parking within those 2 blocks from Washington to Water. But the drive apron for the court and the Justice Center, as well as Washington intersection, are going to stay the same. Now, based on the downtown master plan that was completed, that included that Battery Park property, we are going to be adjusting and adding a 4-way intersection instead of a 3-way intersection at Market. And you know, that's about the extent of any changes for the properties over where the Justice Center Battery Park would be. Besides, I mean, we're doing some streetscape and those types of things as well, but for the most part, the things in and around the court building will stay essentially the same.
could you help me visualize the additional parking? Would this be convenient on-street parking for bait house overflow and such, or?
Well, it'll be public on-street parking, so whoever wants to use it, if that includes the bait house, then absolutely.
I know now they sort of go over and park, across the street in the court, but it doesn't really conflict because their parking demand is after hours for the court stuff, so.
Right.
Any other questions of Aaron for Meg Street? Thank you, Aaron. What about Causeway Wetlands?
Yeah, so that project is moving right along. We have a completion date of around April, but they're hoping to be completed by mid-February at the absolute latest. That doesn't mean that I won't have the contractor on standby as the ice goes out there and probably destroys a little bit of the work that they're doing. Have them come back in the spring and touch it up. So they're almost through with installing the northernmost finger. There were a lot of questions from people about the channel that goes along Cedar Point's overflow parking through the culvert that goes to the back bay. And I think you can see how wide it is and that it really shouldn't affect that flow at this time. We're still going to have the contractor look at making sure that he dredges or that he gets some of that material that's in that area out to make sure that we do have maximum flow through that culvert. But other than that, we're hoping to complete that project within the next month and a half, and really essentially be underway and looking at possibly future phases that might be along that same corridor to the south or even on the western side of the city, along the railroad property as per the Sandusky Bay Initiative.
Any questions for Aaron?
Yeah, what kind of time frame for completion of the project overall, of that establishment of the wetlands? I mean, this goes on for a long time, right? I mean, months and months, years? How long till it's finished?
Yeah, so this is, right now, what we will have is basically a retaining wall sort of structure that is going to allow the Corps of Engineers 1 to possibly 2 or 3 dredging cycles of the shipping channel. And they do that every year or every other year. So it could be 3-4 years before that whole thing is filled. And then it could be a year or two before it's dewatered. And then it could be the following spring when we start regrading and replanting and reshaping everything to install the wetlands. So it could be 5 or 6 years until it's final. But if the Corps dredges this year and next year, we could get right on it within 3 years. So the time frame, depending on some issues with how quickly the material that's dredged will dewater and solidify within that area. I know it seems kind of weird that we're expecting something to dewater while it's sitting out in the bay, but it really means that it's compacting and getting a little more solid. So the goal will be to keep taking some core samples, figure out when the appropriate time is that we can reshape and reconfigure that entire thing so that we can establish the environmental habitat and wetlands.
Thank you.
I'd like to know who's paying for this.
So far, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is paying for the Corps of Engineers changes. The project that we're doing right now is being paid for through ODNR and the state of Ohio. There's a little bit of, I don't believe EPA has any money in it, but it's all through the state of Ohio and the federal government.
Thank you.
So there's no impact on Sandusky budget with this?
The only impacts that we've had on our budget is staff time.
I think this seems kind of obvious, but unless there's active depositing, dredgings or whatever, the public's completely welcome to go paddle around in their kayaks and stuff around that area throughout, right? I mean,
So, yes, one of the things that we're doing is we just got approval from the Coast Guard to install the beacons and the signage. They've had some beacons, but they're not, federally approved U.S. Coast Guard standard. They're more for construction, but we're going to get the permanent ones out there. The goal of the final design is to be able to allow non-motorized kayaks and those types of things, paddle boards, to get inside the wetlands area. Now, the whole thing is going to be diked off completely around it right now, so you won't be able to get any of those paddle boats inside, but it is going to be designed to accommodate at the end.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron? Sandusky Bay Pathway, is there any news there that you can report to us?
No, as far as the pathway and the landing, we're kind of working through some negotiations. Obviously, that slows down in December, in late November, so I don't really have any updates since the beginning of December. But we're still just working through the acquisition phase of those two projects.
Aaron, on Venice Road, I saw some positive comments online about it. Is that settled down, and is it becoming more clear what that's going to look like long-term with the pylons and all that stuff? Because it seems like, despite the criticism, it seems like lots of people are happy to have the option of, not walking on the edge of the road out there. And yet, the controversy remains, even though, so what do we know about the long-term vision for that?
Well, so what you see out there right now is really what it is. What we do, similar to what we did in downtown, is those delineators that are installed at the commercial driveways. We remove those in the winter so we can provide for snow removal. So those will be reinstalled back in the spring so that we don't have trucks driving on the pathway. The last feature that we're trying to do as part of this project is get those banners up. We've been reaching brick walls when it comes to AT&T on using their poles. There's just so much permitting and requirements and engineering review and all these other things just to install those banners on the poles that we're still trying to get through those details. But in the end, you might see mile markers out there. You could see some directional signage and wayfinding signage once you get to some further stages in the project. It's almost impossible right now to install mile markers that start at the foot of Columbus Avenue at Shoreline Drive all the way to the east and west until you have those connections and know the exact mileage. So we don't want to install those types of things until we know exactly what those mile markers are. So there will be other features added. It could be a year, 2, 3, 4 years out, or right after we do other phases of the project. There's supposed to be a seat wall at the corner of Edgewater in Venice eventually. That should help people kind of see that, hey, we've got a pathway here. Maybe you could pull over and enjoy it. Maybe you could go up to the park and enjoy it. Those types of things. So there are other features. There's a whole signage and branding package and wayfinding package for this project, and we're planning on implementing parts of it. Some more of the branding pieces, like the blue and green striping, the banners, those types of things, but the wayfinding and signage might need to come a little bit later just because we need to make those connections.
Is it safe to say that wayfinding and mile markers that might, evolve into a different form as people use their personal GPSs in their pocket more and more, that we might even wind up changing, what that's going to look like over time?
Yeah, absolutely. And the intent is not to have it stop as far west as it is now at Cold Creek. Obviously we want to continue that farther west. So as the pathway develops, depending on technology and other things like that, if I can save money on signage, then I'll do that, because everybody's going to have their handheld devices with them. So as we proceed with the project, we'll certainly analyze those things, but we also want to make it as beautiful of a path and as great of an amenity for the community as possible.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron?
Well, I'm not sure that this is exactly related. I'm not sure how to find the right spot on the agenda other than old business maybe, but South of McDonald's on, I think it's Causeway Drive going out there. For a long time, there was these big trees where the drainage ditch came across or something, and there was a project that was going to be there, and maybe it got stopped because of archaeological finds of Indian remnants there or something. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? It seems like those logs are gone now. I wonder if that project is entirely abandoned now, or if it's still in a delay sort of process.
And so that was a project that got funded by ODNR and the state to do some shoreline stabilization type work along the western side of Pipe Creek, and Bree Holman through Soil and Water District was working on that project. And as they had gone through it, they found so many archaeological findings, and this is my understanding. I haven't seen any documentation, but this is just through conversations with Bree. But they had found some archaeological things, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but there were some artifacts there that they kind of realized that it was going to be long and drawn out, and so that's why they used those funds to move south of the Cedar Point property. That project that was done a year and a half ago, south of Cleveland Road on the east side of Pipe Creek in that little area, south of Cedar Point's maintenance complex.
Yes, yes.
Those funds were redirected to there, and they did a similar project, an environmental project at that location rather than a shore stabilization. Now, as far as those trees being removed, I'm not familiar if that was part of that project or if that was just Cedar Point doing maintenance on their own property. But I know what you're talking about with the trees being removed, and I do know that, Cedar Point owns a large majority of that side of the Cedar Point Drive. And they had been, with the recent elevations and bay levels, they had been doing some maintenance out there when trees were getting washed up.
Yeah, it makes sense. My understanding was those trees were going to be somehow incorporated in that project, so seeing them gone just made me think that that project is done. And it makes sense what you're saying about that money reapplied elsewhere, which I think is a great project. I'm looking forward to the time that an easement can be established with Cedar Point for access to that through their parking lot, or maybe a little shared parking back there or something for public access to that, because that project is really nice back there, but you can only access it now by paddle power pretty much, but that's fine. I mean, it's good.
Any other questions? How about the landing? Any updates there? It says that we have none on the agenda, but I'm going to see if you have anything to say about that.
No, we're in the same, just trying to get through acquisition.
Okay. Any community input? Hearing none. Any other comments from the board members?
Well,
New business item?
what's that?
The new business item?
We did have a new business item that we skipped over that we could delay, I suppose.
We have a quorum now, though, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Want to kick it down the road? I'm okay.
Well, yeah, or I could just nominate you for chair because, you just seem to be able to come to every meeting.
No, I like our current chair, I like our current secretary. I would nominate re-upping the current slate of officers if that was appropriate.
I would second that.
We have a
there-
motion and a second?
There you go.
It's been moved and seconded that we maintain the current list of officers. Any further discussion? All in favor of the 5 members here that can now vote on that, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we'll have the
Congratulations.
same officers, which consists of Carl McGookie as our chair, I'm still functioning as secretary. Are there any other officers? I don't think, those are the only two.
I don't think we had a vice.
Well, again, I want to thank you, 2 chickens for every pot, and hope things go forward here.
I'd like the record to reflect that it was a unanimous proclamation.
I agree
Well,
with that.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Any other business today? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.